Hi, you guys. I'm John.
Hey, John.
Welcome. I know every one of you by name now, so that'll help us out. Just a little background on me and what I do. I'm actually a psychotherapist down in Pasadena, and I specialize in work with adolescents, but especially with gay and lesbian teens and their families during the coming out process. So, what made me want to work in that world? Part of it was my own experience. I'm a gay man, and for me, my coming out process was absolutely easy and nothing at all. My family was fine with it. My friends thought it was kind of cool, like they had their gay friends. And I taught them all how to hug when we met each other, and now they can't help themselves. So, I had an influence on that. My partner, though, who grew up in Bakersfield, which is just an hour and a half north of us, had an incredibly different experience. He experienced a lot of verbal and physical bullying. And one of the things that happened once is his dad had picked him up after school. And he got in the car and the windows were down. And as they were driving away, a bunch of kids in front of the school yelled out, "Faggot." And my partner and his dad drove home in complete silence because neither of them knew what to do with that. They didn't know how to talk about it. They didn't know how to express feelings about it. My partner wasn't out to himself or the world at that time. And so it just left this just dirty, rotten egg in the middle of the car. And I think us as professionals are part of that front line that can be there for these kids and their families when issues of sexual orientation or gender identity are coming into play. So that's why I'm here today, to share some of that knowledge with you. And I hope you guys will now take this knowledge we're going to share today and bring it out to the front line of your work. So, you guys ready to do this? Okay. So the other thing about it too is I could stand up here and talk to you for the next hour, and I would eventually bore myself. This is interactive. So I want to include your experiences, your knowledge in this process as well too. So you guys on board with that? Okay, cool. You thought, I could just sit here, get a free lunch, and get out. No, I'm going to make you talk. That's just how it works. Okay. Another reason why we want to come together is just looking at some of the statistics that are out there. And there are multiple studies that are now very longitudinal that are looking at how up to 74% of LGBT kids in college who are surveyed say they were bullied in some way during high school, middle school, or elementary school. Okay, 3/4 of the gay kids say that they were somehow bullied. Okay? I want you to think about that. We all go through some bullying through school. It's just part of the ritual, unfortunately. 74% of these kids say they have these experiences. And when I look at it, up to 33% of these kids say they either attempted or considered suicide during high school. Okay? Now these are the kids they were able to survey, which means they survived. And I'm sure you guys are aware of the number of kids out there who are gay, lesbian, transgender, and are not surviving, that are choosing to end their lives because they see that as the only option. And to me, that's not okay. So that's part of our work. That's part of why I do this. Okay? So, there's also a new study. I want to share this with you. It's not published yet, but it's coming out some interesting information about how adult gay males actually have trouble with self-esteem and socialization based on bullying in high school. It's a new piece. It's a 2-year study. It should be coming out probably in the fall. But it's some exciting news that's looking at what happens to people who are bullied later in life. So if you realize that these effects aren't just in the moment, but they affect people for a lifelong experience, I think this work is really important. So I like to start at the very beginning to make sure we're all using the same language. So let's look. Let's look at commonly used language that you may have heard thrown about in the world. Now, a lot of you may have heard it to this point. Some of you may have heard it to here. Some of you may have heard it through here, and then down through here and across the floor and out the door. Okay? There are a lot of letters that could be on this list. This is where we're going to start from today. So let's just define these together. L is for? Lesbian. Don't you suddenly feel like you're on Sesame Street? Okay, and how would you guys offer a definition for lesbian?
Somebody is only attracted to a female Female.
Okay.
Female to female.
Okay, so attracted
They
female.
don't have any desire to be interactive with a male, so to speak.
Okay,
On a sexual level.
okay, on a sexual level, okay. Anybody else would want to add something to that?
A female whose primary romantic relationships are with women.
Okay, so primary romantic relationships are with women, okay? One of the things that I like to do is let the definition be that their social, emotional, and sexual needs are met by someone of the same sex. So what we're doing at is not just looking at the sexual story of it, which is kind of the easier way to define it, and then we add a little bit more to it, but looking at the whole person as how their needs are met by that person who's also female, okay? Does that make sense? Which gives you a big clue on the next one. G stands for?
Okay.
And how would we define that? Go. Social, emotional, sexual.
Someone whose needs are met, social, emotional, sexual needs are met by a man.
Yes, so this would be a male-to-male energy that we're talking about here. Now, an interesting to study, understand about this is the word gay is often seen as an umbrella term until a few years ago. And what happened during that period is actually the lesbian community said, we actually have our own unique needs that need to be addressed, and this umbrella, it doesn't feel comfortable anymore. So we want to take the energy we've developed here as a community, and we want to expand on it and let it grow. So oftentimes, the lesbian community will identify primarily as lesbian, or the male community will identify as gay. Okay? So just something to think about language-wise. B? Bisexual. Okay, go for it. Anybody?
Someone whose social, emotional, sexual needs are met by both men and women.
Yes. Yep. How many of you, when you hear the word bisexual, and please just, it's okay, we're an okay room, right? How many of you, when you hear the word bisexual, are like, really? Okay, you have little question marks that come up your head. Okay, so I'll say the laughter says there's a little bit of that exists. It's important to understand that bisexual is not just a stop on the road to gay, okay, or lesbian. That there actually is a fully realized bisexual community. And if you think about any minority community, that if everyone thinks, oh, you're just not willing to say this, that that's discriminatory towards them. So to really understand that when someone talks about bisexuality as their viable lifestyle, then we need to meet them there and respect them for that, okay? And let our own little question mark judgments go out back, or go to our supervisor, or get consultation, okay? T.
Asexual. Transgender.
Thank you. Okay, so who would like to offer a definition for transgender?
A person who doesn't identify by their assigned gender at birth.
Okay, still right on. But there's a really important word that you said, and I hope the word caught it.
Identified.
It was assigned, okay? So that definition is actually spot on. We're looking at someone whose gender identity, their sense of themselves, doesn't agree with the assigned sex of the body. Now, why do we say assigned? Okay. Well, when you're a kid and you're born and you come out, let's just go with an old-fashioned image of this. The doctor pulls you out, slaps you in the booty and says, it's a boy, it's a girl. Okay? So it is assigned for you based on this external look of your genitalia. But it may have absolutely nothing to do with who you actually are. So this idea of assigned is a really powerful way to respect that we're pushing against a social construct, and we're trying to create space for there to be expansion in that story. So assigned is a very respectful way to talk about transgender. Okay. Q, the first one.
Questioning.
We'll go with questioning first, because I heard it first. Questioning would be?
Well, the person is questioning what actually, who they really are. they're vacillating between their thoughts and their feelings and trying to decide where they really fit into society. Or,
Yeah, that idea of vacillating between thoughts and feelings, very much so, is really a great definition of that questioning phase. You know, what I'm feeling, what my body's desiring, what feels correct in the social story, what my family would say. Questioning opens up all that space. Now, it's really interesting for a high school female to say that they're questioning. There's a lot of space for that story to be okay. I think I might be. I'm interested in that girl. It could be. No, I want to date that guy. This is okay. Strangely enough, for high school boys, it is not okay. The minute they make any statement of like, I might be attracted to a guy, they get shoved into this category. So you can see how delicate that space of questioning can be. Because if they put that question out into the universe, boys will be categorized much more quickly than girls will. And I think that's something important to understand of what they're going through. Okay, the other cue? Oh wait, you have a question? Yeah.
Is questioning, is that generally used in terms of sexuality or with gender also?
Both. Okay, the next cue would be,
Queer.
okay? And who would like to offer me a thought on what that means?
That's sort of also an umbrella term a little bit, like someone who fits multiple categories of these definitions might say they're queer, like if they're bisexual, transgender male, they might say queer.
Okay.
queer could be an image of maybe somebody that's gay or somebody who likes to cross-dress.
I might not lean that direction.
It's politically charged, and it's a reclamation of a negative term. So I think it sort of lends itself to people who are more, maybe view themselves not as isolated by the other terms, but sort of broader sense.
And the big word I heard for you is taking ownership. So for a long time, the word queer is a derogatory word in the community. Queer, faggot, all those words are thrown at people to put them down. A while ago, people said, well, no, we like to own the word queer. And it's not just about who we sleep with. It's also about what we believe in and what change we want to see in the world. And so queer became a push against a social construct of gay, straight, all of these pieces, and said, we don't want to just fit under those categories. We want to take ownership of this. We want to make change in how the world addresses this story. So queer definitely has a lot of political connotations to it. And I think it's really exciting to take a word that was derogatory and bring it back and take it as your power word. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Okay?
One question. Was it ever used like for shock value?
I think most words that are used to put down any minority community are used for
When you
shock
take
value.
it back.
That's an interesting
When you own
question.
it.
I think with ACT UP it was, I think in the late
10
80s
years
and early
ago, 20 years
90s,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually, it would shock the community to say like, no, you can't use it as a bad word,
Yeah,
we're not
we're
gonna
gonna-
say,
yeah.
we believe in this. Yeah, beautiful, thank you. Okay, I would be,
Intersex?
uh-huh. And that is,
I don't know how to define it. Correct.
you're gonna take a shot at it.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I honestly don't know.
Okay, anybody else?
I would say it was somebody who doesn't buy into the binary of male, female, but sees sexuality and orientation as a continuum, and it can be anywhere in it. They don't want to be defined. I don't have to be defined as male or
Right.
female.
And I would probably use your definition. You may have heard this term thrown about as somebody who sees themselves as non-binary. I would actually use your definition as that. I had a person explain this so well to me the other day. Any computer people in the room, you know everything is ones and zeros. So if these are all ones and zeros, a non-binary person doesn't want to be a 1 or a 0. They want to create their own expression of what they are. They could be a 7. Okay? So that would be more of a non-binary, non-gender conforming person. I think that definition. Okay.
Intersex, isn't it, it's people who have anatomically sexual characteristics of both genders.
Right. So in other words, this is the term we now use for hermaphrodite.
Mhm.
But if you think about this, we are looking at really the sexual components of anatomy in this statement. The thing that's tough about this too, though, is it goes back to a word we used up here, which is assigned. So most intersex kids, when they're young, are assigned a gender based on their parents' desire or a doctor's need. Okay? So a doctor says, well, they look mostly male exterior, so we're gonna call it a boy. Or parents really, really wanted a girl, but this child has representations of both types of anatomy in their body. They're going to raise a girl. Okay? So we're looking at a huge external force trying to define these kids. And later on in their teens, especially when puberty hits, they're going to hit a place where they're going to start pushing back against that and wanting to decide who they want to be in the world. Okay? Any of you watch BuzzFeed at all? There's a great, great piece on there with an interview with 6 intersex kids. They're my heroes. They're amazing, okay? If you ever have a chance, if you just Google intersex teenagers and then hit videos, it will come up usually in the top 5. It's really cool one to watch. These kids will inspire you. It will change your life. Okay, one more letter that we have, which is
Agender.
A, which is,
Agender.
Asexual.
okay.
Ally?
I love how the world has expanded. You guys are automatically bringing in some of these other letters from the other part of the story, okay? So the place I used to like to put this was with ally. Because an ally is those of you in the room who are here right now who said, I want to come and learn about this. An ally is someone who wants to be a responsible member of the support of this community, okay? So that's where ally arrives. If we look at another letter that you just came up with, which is asexual, how would you define that?
No sexual attraction whatsoever to either gender.
It's interesting because, as you said, sexual attraction, there's an interesting, like, grayness in that word for me, the attraction part. There's no sexual interaction, so I would move more that direction. And remember, asexual is different than celibate. Celibate is based on a choice by some type of moralistic or potentially religious choice. Asexual is more of an internally driven response. Okay? Any other letters you guys would add to this? This is a fun group. I can't wait to hear where we go.
What about pansexual?
Yay, the P! Woohoo! Go for it. So pansexual.
Love is love.
Love is love. That's their catchphrase. We should all have T-shirts that say that. Okay? So pansexuals are pushing against this conformity, this binary that we live in. They're saying love is love. And if it wants to be like you and me, and then you come along for the party, and it's not just about sex, it's about this intimate emotional connection and relationship as well too. So they're kind of on the forefront of exploring how we interact as social, emotional, and sexual beings. I think it's kind of cool. Okay. Any other letters you want to add to that? There are a ton we could add. Okay, then we'll work with what we have here. So what we've done is we've created this story together. And another really important component of this, let me get my eraser real quick, is understanding the basics of how we look at some of these pieces we used as we were defining these parts of the community. And new color, let's go for green. Okay. So when we are born, remember I talked about the doctor says, look, it's a boy. What we're looking at that moment is biological sex. So when we're addressing the story of biological sex, we're really just looking at the anatomy of the bodies that we're talking about. Okay, so this is based on physiology. And it doesn't have anything to do with any other parts. It has to do with genitalia. It has to do with external representations that we see as a male body or a female body. What we're born with, okay? So the next piece of that is actually gender identity. So in gender identity, what we're actually exploring is the social construct of what makes someone a man or a woman. And I use the word social construct because this is defined by an external story, okay? It's what society says a woman is supposed to wear. You know, you see all the award shows coming up. Women are supposed to be in these sweeping gowns with these necklaces and makeup on. Men are supposed to be in their tuxedos or their suits, okay? Males are keeping their hair shorter, females having longer hair. All of these things that are identified. The idea of little girls' toys versus little boys' toys. All of those things are defined on a sociological level. So here in the United States, we have a very definite idea of what male and female looks like. Does this make sense to you guys? Okay? The thing that's so important to understand about this is that culturally, it shifts. So what we may believe here is completely different if you were living in Asia or Central America or Europe. Okay? And it can even be based on microcosms in some case. But it's being aware that this is defined by external sources. Does that make sense? Okay. So gender identity is external. Yeah, let's go this way. Okay, so let's talk about gender expression. Does anybody know what I'm looking at in gender expression?
Is it what they're expressing, like
You
the-
can't use the same word to define it. She's a student. Sorry, I had to go there.
No,
Okay, go ahead, Minna.
what they're presenting?
Okay. So gender expression is looking at, well, what am I wearing? How am I talking about myself in the world? How do I actually express gender into the community? This is a self-defined story. This is me inside looking at my gender story, okay? Which is where I like to bring in this really cool little diversion, which between gender identity and gender expression is gender itself. This is looking at the internal story. How do I see myself on a scale of masculine or feminine? What do I believe and what do I feel inside myself? Okay? Which will often be very different than this gender identity, the external story moving in. In gender expression, we get to practice this and let it be seen by the world. And that's where we start getting back our cues. So if someone walks up to you and you've decided you're going to wear that really cool necklace today. And then the presenter walks over and points it out and says, that actually is a really cool necklace. Is that necklace now going to have more value for you in some ways? Because you started getting a positive response to it? Okay? So if I'm a kid in high school and I decide that there's a certain color I like to wear as an expression of how I'm feeling inside, and I get positive reaction to it, guess what my wardrobe's going to turn into? Mostly that color. Okay? If we're looking at ideas in the trans community of trying to disguise the body, then I'm going to shift what I wear so my expression becomes more of what I feel inside, and people aren't going to see the physical manifestation, the biological sex of my body, which doesn't agree with my inside gender. Okay? So gender expression is really fun and exciting because you'll watch kids try things on. And then 3 weeks later, they'll try another identity. And it's really cool. It's a great period to work with them. The final piece of this little section is about sexual orientation. Wait a minute, my orientation. Okay, just pretend that says orientation. So what are we talking about? We're looking at sexual orientation. Go back to the previous scale. What are we looking at? We're looking at who we're attracted to sexually and romantically and emotionally. This is all about this sexual and emotional attraction. I'd like to separate these two because a lot of times you'll hear this on the news. They'll say, yes, there was a transgender parade this week and people were expressing their sexual orientation. No. Gender identity, gender, and sexual orientation have nothing to do with each other, okay? This is its own thing, and this is its own expression. And a lot of people do try and blend those together. They are not blended, they're very different things, okay? And we're gonna explore that together right now. So, turn this away, people. Okay. So on the top line, we have the sex you were born with. Next, ooh, this red marker is not a good friend. Let me get that one. We have gender identity, and that was a big step in the right direction. Okay. Next, we have gender expression. And finally, we have sexual orientation. Okay. So, I'm just getting more markers for it. So in all of this conversation, I hope you started picking up on the idea that these definitions are actually all fluid. That they don't have to lock into one position and stay there constantly. And anybody who's worked with teenagers knows that you have to respect fluidity of all sorts, or you're just going to become another adult in their world that they throw things at. Okay? So if we look at it specifically here, one of the best ways to show how this works is I like to use this with clients actually in a how are you actually in this moment today, right now. So for me, today, sex I was born on the male side, gender identity, I'm feeling about there. Gender expression, I feel I'm on kind of this side today. And say today I'm right about there in the sexual orientation. So what I'm doing is I'm identifying in this moment right here, right now. Now, I did this presentation a few weeks ago, and these were actually in different places. And that's what's really valuable about using this type of tool with kids, is we put together a big piece of poster board, and we set this up. And then from week to week, they actually have the opportunity to come in and say how they're feeling that week. And for them to be able to watch the movement on the scale is really exciting as well. It helps them open up, pushing against these social constructs of who they are supposed to be. And it gives them a way to really see it happening. I found one of the best ways to make this work is actually to have you guys try it out a little bit. So is there anybody who would be willing to come up here and mark this scale for themselves today?
Yeah, I'll do it. I was
Very
late
good.
anyway, so
Oh, see.
I'll do it. Might as well, either that or do like 100 push-ups for me. All right, what are we doing here?
Okay.
I just want to make sure I got it right, because I might go wrong and be like, whoa.
So this is actually scaling your biological sex.
Okay.
This is your gender identity, how you feel if you identify more as a man or a woman. Your gender expression, you express yourself more masculine or feminine. And your sexual orientation, do you see yourself as more gay or straight or anywhere on these spectrums? So you can put that anywhere.
So I am a male, so I would put the,
Okay?
okay, that's be the male. Identity would be how I identify myself, or is it how, on a balance of how much I have, you know, because everybody, most of the males have like a feminine side to them anyway, they're supposed to be, right, ladies? You beat me up, ladies. So I would say a little feminine in there would be about.
Okay.
Wish I was more.
So your gender expression is how you're expressing yourself today, is more masculine or feminine?
Okay, I'd have to say. I try to be considerate, so I'll put myself almost.
Okay.
And
Perfect. Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Honor, Mr.
Welcome,
Jones.
good to see you. Okay. So even with someone who just walked in, do you see that little moment of like, oh?
He's been
yeah.
there, you just didn't walk in, you've been around, right?
Well, I was trying to take care of
He was
something,
trying to be
but
slick.
I was late.
Oh, that's compliment.
I was late, I've been having a long week, it's, nobody wants to hear about it.
Okay. Okay.
All those compliment.
My son is a female to male. So it's interesting, I see the spectrum all the time, like
Uh-huh.
sometimes he likes his curves,
Uh-huh.
sometimes he wants to be identified as a male, or sometimes he's interested in a female, or it's really interesting, so I kind of see it like almost like every other day it kind of changes, so
Right.
it's nice, so I see this.
So this is real life, do you
Yeah.
hear?
Mhm.
I mean, this is what you're witnessing in your child.
Yeah,
That's
so I'm
really
just like
exciting.
cracking up, I'm like, okay, maybe we should put that up.
You, actually, you can.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants, I have a PDF of this I can send you. Just email me and I can send it back to you, and you can use this in your work. It's really cool. I'll show you actually the picture of it because it's really slick and nice. Anybody else want to just give it a shot? Come on, let's be brave together. We had lunch. We can do
I
this.
do.
Come on up.
Okay, so I have a question though, because, so the first one is the gender or the biological aspect which
Uh-huh.
we've been assigned.
Right.
So unless intersex, it will be a constant. Or am I,
Mm-mm. What if I were transgender and I was already looking at gender conforming?
right, yes,
So that would be different, right?
Okay.
That wouldn't be on a daily basis though.
who knows? I mean, it could,
No,
right?
I mean,
As we were saying.
I guess my.
Well, like if I'm in the process of starting on like hormone therapy or T
Right.
blockers or something
Sure,
like that,
yeah.
there are gonna be shifts that I'm gonna feel, maybe my T blockers start moving me this direction over time,
Yeah.
okay?
So I see your point, but I guess for the
And?
majority, and I'll bring myself into that, it's like male, I don't see it moving anywhere, and it's just gonna be constant on that
Mhm.
side. So I could see that for a small percentage of the population, as you mentioned, that could, play as a fluid or, all
Mhm.
that, but for the majority would be a constant.
Well, and I would never want to
I'm
put
sorry.
that constraint on the exercise itself, because what I like to do is allow people to make their own statement about that, okay? Remember, this is who you feel you are right now in this moment.
Yeah,
And that's the most important
Right.
thing about this particular technique right now. Not a big generalized story, but right now.
yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm born female, I'm planning on staying female,
Cool.
so I'd say I'm here.
Okay?
I identify as a woman,
Mhm.
so I'm still here.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Please.
Because I hear an accent. Where are you from?
I'm from Israel,
Okay, and were you born and raised
there,
there?
yes.
Okay. Answer me this. Is there a difference between the role of a woman that's supposed to be in Israel versus what your experience is here? Are there any slight shifts or alterations that you've noticed?
I find that I don't like making a generalization about an American woman or an Israeli woman
Mhm.
in terms of gender or, gender
Right.
stereotypes. Israel is a very Western, at least where I come from, is a very Western sort of
Right.
thinking place.
Mhm.
I haven't found that I need to shift
Okay.
so much, it's more other aspects of being that change, yeah.
Okay, cool, yeah, just a curiosity.
Yeah, no. It's also interesting because in Hebrew, Hebrew is a very binary language, and there isn't an it, there isn't a gender neutral
Right.
anything. So I'm thinking a lot about that. I feel pretty masculine today. So I do. So I'd say I'm here even. And I tend to be straight, so that's
Okay. So one thing that I want you guys to notice too, and we're gonna move on, is that, did you see with everybody doing it, it also brought on a conversation. And what's the most important thing that we can offer our clients is a space to open that conversation, okay? Like this brought up a question for me, because I was thinking, oh, we have someone, I hear an accent, born somewhere else, I'd love to explore that, I think that's really fascinating. Or even the ideas here, well, today I'm definitely feeling, I think those are beautiful conversation starters, and that's what this tool can help you with in the room, okay? So really powerful, and I find to be very useful. So where are we at time-wise? I want to make sure I respect your guys' time.
It is 1 p.m.
And I'm going till what time? I'm still so confused by
I
this.
know too.
I know they messed the time up, I apologize for that.
No, because we started early, so I'm really confused right now.
I guess you can go until you're done. If you feel like it.
What are we having for dinner, Jeff?
Don't worry, I got a credit card, you can get pretty much whatever you want.
So this one is your plan for weekend.
Oh, wait, let me make sure I can show you guys this. I don't know if you're able to see it really well. But this is actually what I'd be able to email you. So you
That's
can,
great.
so it's just really helpful. And like I said, I do it on a big poster board for each of my clients that wants to address this, and then we work through it. And the thing that's really interesting, and I want to share you how a non-biased presentation this can work. I actually work on this with some of my straight kids too. Not as in a like, I'm suspecting my little spidey sense going up, I think they're good. No, more about a respectful understanding of the community they're in. And most of them dig it. They think it's really cool. Okay? So I just want to present to you that it has different aspects of use as well.
Would you use it during an intake, or do you use it kind of throughout the therapy process?
It really depends. In other words, like I work with a bunch of the different teen treatment centers, and they'll actually, well, some of the kids you're working with, them, they'll bring them to me specifically for, bless you,
Thank you.
for some of these questions, and it will come in right away. I'll have other clients who will be working on stuff for a while, and we'll be talking about something, and all of a sudden they'll be like, ping, I want to bring this into the room. So it can work in lots of different methods depending on how you want to use it. Okay. So I want to do a quick walkthrough of the coming out process. And I want to make this quick because I want us to also really look at the family dynamics that extend into this process of coming out. And the one thing that I want you to hear really strongly is that coming out is a process, okay? It's not just like, Mom, Dad, I'm gay, woohoo, and all is okay. It's actually a lifelong process for most people who are part of the LGBTQIA+AP community. That's what we came up with today, okay? It's a lifelong process. And there are moments where you're going to hit things. When gay marriage became a nationwide approved thing, I went through a huge process for myself. I'll share it with you real quick. So I had grown up in a lifetime and a generation of thinking that marriage would never really occur for me. I'd been in long-term relationships, and that was really wonderful and delicious. But marriage was way out here. And my current partner was aware of my beliefs on marriage. So, June 26th, the decision comes down, and he comes home, like, oh my God, the decision. He's like, I know, I read the entire thing, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about it at a very cerebral level. And then I start crying. He's like, what is wrong with you? I said, are we going to get married? He's like, you don't want to get married. What had happened for me was, I like to describe it like those glow sticks. There was this vial, and inside was this little glass thing. And when the opportunity became available, that glass thing broke, and all of a sudden I was flooded with the possibility of it. And it was so emotionally overwhelming for me. And it made me have to come out to myself at a new level on what I believed and wanted or desired. And I think that's really cool about this idea of the coming out process being a lifelong story. Okay? So, we start with a phase called identity confusion. In identity confusion, this is when most kids are looking at this idea that, I'm feeling something different than I hear all the other kids on the playground talking about. Now, most people I work with are like, oh, well, that's like a teenager when they're in puberty. Nope. Starting in elementary school, middle schools, it's something that is permeating into a lot of kids' conversations. And so in identity confusion, it's like, I think I might be attracted to that certain person in a certain way, but I'm not hearing that as part of the general conversation. Yeah, we struck money. Not hearing that as part of the conversation of what's okay. So a couple of things that can happen in this moment. Excuse me while I get some tea. First, we can use an inhibition strategy. And in that way, we just say, nope, not having these feelings, not having these feelings, not having these feelings. And now I'm gonna go play with everybody else and just be like them, okay? Also, there's a personal innocence strategy, which is looking at, well, I may be having these feelings, but I don't know what they mean, so whatever, and we go about life. And then there's my personal favorite, because it's what I did. There's the information gathering strategy. May I share you another personal story? Okay, so imagine 6th grade science class. I was already starting to identify as gay, and knew I was in a different place than a lot of my friends. I told my friends I was taking an extracurricular class out of school. And I put together this survey on your attitudes towards gay people. And I handed it out to them all to take this survey. Now, me being as smart as I was, I gave each person a different colored pen to fill it out with. So I gathered information to find out how my friends would react if I came out, okay? Now that's where I first learned that most of them would have been okay with it, but I wasn't ready to make that statement quite yet. But that was me doing a personal information gathering. Other ways kids will do it is they'll start listening around the house. How do my parents react when a gay character is in a movie or TV show? What happens? What conversations do I hear during the holidays when, like, gay marriage got approved? What am I hearing? They're gathering information. Is this safe? Is this okay? Okay. The next place we go to is identity comparison. So in identity comparison, we're starting to personalize the information a little bit more. It's becoming more realistic for us. And I'm going to speak through this series as a gay man because it's easier for me to just relate it that way. Okay? But think about it in all the other letters of the acronym that we were looking at. I'm starting to relate more to it. A couple of things that can happen to it. I can say, yes, I'm gay inside, but I'm going to totally push away from anything that seems to be gay. Okay? I can say I'm gay inside, but there's nothing I really want to act on or ready to act on yet. Okay? The one that you guys have probably heard is a little more stereotypical is I'm gay inside and I'm going to do everything in the world I can do to convince the world that I'm not.
Suppressing.
So these are some of the attitudes that may come up in this period. Yeah.
Quick question, just a clarification. When you refer that to the sense that I'm gay inside, on that scale, what are you referring to?
We're looking specifically at sexual orientation in this question mark.
Okay, so if that sexual orientation is also fluid, and that is day to day, it's becomes more of a taste, right? So today someone may like pink, tomorrow they may like blue, this food or that food and whatever else it is, and it's also the orientation that from a sexual orientation in terms of like who am I attracted to?
Right.
Blonde, brunette, male, female, whatever it is. So in that sense, when you refer to, and it creates a confusion for me as I'm listening to you, is that when you say that, inside I feel gay, then I'm like, well, it's just like a feeling then that comes up, right? Rather than something that is solid, if it makes sense. Does that make it?
I may not be ready to express what I now know more about myself. I may not be ready, if we think of gender expression, but then think of that an expression of being a person, I may be starting to say this identity of LGBT is fitting more appropriately with who I am, but in this identity comparison phase, I may not be ready to let you, my best friend, know. I may not be ready for my school to know, my parents to know, I may not be ready for my church to know. So this is still a very internal process at this time. Does that help?
No, it does make sense.
Good.
And for me, like as a male, I'll just go back really quick to that scale. I would always score one of the highest one on the feminine principle, right? And just because I have that didn't mean that anything else on that board will change, right? And I was okay with expressing it and all the stuff, right? But that became, like from a Jungian perspective, I'm looking at it, like you all both have a masculine and feminine principles, right? So it comes handy when I'm dealing, with my daughter. It comes handy when I'm dealing with a female patient. And on the other side, the masculine principle will come handy when I'm hanging out with guys. So the question, I guess, that the confusion that comes to me is that, so when you're talking about how we express ourselves, right? that is completely different than what we are originally born with, or the gender that, and I get the expression that you mentioned in the hospital that this is the case, that
Right.
and I totally agree with you. But let's say everything on a medical perspective, a medical side, biologically was a male or female, right? And it would be irrelevant of to someone expressing themselves orientation-wise.
Right.
So I guess that's a conflict that I have with when you say internal, do you really just
Right.
refer to the psychological and also the emotional state? Or do you refer to the biological state?
Well, at this moment, we're primarily talking about sexual orientation, okay, in this coming out scale, which is a little bit different than the piece of what this puzzle was addressing. The thing to understand is we're looking at the sexual, social, and emotional needs of the people who are coming out. So those are the aspects of what we're looking at. Does that help to answer what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, everybody doing okay? Any questions on where we're at? Okay, so next comes a piece called identity tolerance. So in identity tolerance, we're starting to get this slightly frustrated, do you notice how I say frustrated comfort with it? Because at this point, we may not know what to do with what we're feeling inside. Slightly different. It's a larger scale story, and we're starting to try and reach out, and maybe like, okay, you're my best friend, and I have something to tell you. And I start to hint about coming out to you. And you know where I'm going, but you're really my best friend, and you let me like wander around for 3 hours before I can tell you, okay? This is me finally starting to come in tolerance with this identity, okay? I may not be ready to tell anybody else, and I may like swear you to absolute secrecy, because for right now, I'm trying to see how this relates to my community at large. The story's getting a little bit bigger, the shell's starting to crack, I can't contain it completely, and now I want to bring it out into the world. Where this can take us to next is identity acceptance. So in identity acceptance, what we're starting to do now is we're actually taking ownership of this version of ourselves that we're ready to express to the world. We're actually saying, this is the time when I'm ready to start coming out to people. The one thing that I always I'm so adamant about encouraging clients to do is understanding the idea. Can you play my best friend yet again? Okay. So I have my story. I'm finally ready to come out. I say, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you. I take my story and I come out and I hand it to you. Okay? Now, what I always talk to clients about is I have now completely lost control of that story. And they need to be hyper aware of this moment. Because that's a huge change. My story has gotten so big that I now have to hand it off to someone else. And what I'd like to explore is the idea like, you may be my best friend and love me, love me, love me, but we're in high school together. And I've handed you something huge. And it's not that you want to gossip or anything, but it's too much. So you want to reach over and you want to tell your best friend, oh my God, John just came out to me, but don't tell anybody. Because you need to relieve the pressure on yourself. It's a lot to carry, okay? So now, all of a sudden, you know I'm gay, but I didn't tell you. And then let's say you're like, whoa, this is a big story, and you want to tell your two best friends. And all of a sudden, this story is much bigger. And I always work with clients on that to let them understand what happens when they start sharing their story. Now, most kids tend to share with either a best friend or a close relative. Those are usually the stepping stone, the bridge, the testing people. And then they might come into a bigger unit of family. But there's usually going to be a test person before they go to mom and dad. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Where are we going? Oh, my favorite moment of working with clients now is a piece called Identity Pride. And the best way to explain this is to tell you about an amazing client of mine. So when he came to see me, he had actually been hospitalized, suicidal, and when he came to see me, the first thing that came out is I'm gay and nobody knows. Which is the way a lot of kids come to me, unfortunately. We worked about a year and a half later, he had gone through all this, and he was out big time. Now fortunately, he was going to a no-tolerance school, so he wasn't bullied, he was really safe in that environment. But one day he came and he said, okay, I'm ready to make this big statement. And he had gone online and he had bought like this gay pride ring and this necklace with male to male and this rainbow t-shirt, and he got rainbow laces for his shoelaces, and he was like, I'm gonna wear it all to school. And I was like, cool, if you feel that's where you wanna go, you go there. And he was so busting with pride for this new identity that was so delicious to him that he had to take it out in the world, let everybody see it. And it's so much fun playing with kids in this phase because they will just surprise you with the ways they wanna bring it to the world. I had one kid who wrote a really beautiful and powerful piece for his school paper. You know, I have had kids like this who do it more by accoutrements. I have others who like start the GSAs in their schools, okay? So this is a really exciting phase to be with your clients in. And it's just colorful and buoyant, and they come in excited about every aspect who they are. And the last piece of this is when we come into identity, excuse me, we're doing construction, and I have so much dust in my throat. Go ahead.
This part that you just discussed kind of reminds me of a different model for identity development. It's not related to coming out, but also like racial identity development, where it's like a rejection of whatever the norm is, and it's almost like a hyper-correction, where it might actually kind of go overboard, like we were talking about, like rainbow everything, or like Rastafarian everything if we're talking racial, something along those lines. And then it self-corrects though, typically.
Right, and that's where we're looking at what's next, which is identity synthesis.
Gotcha.
So one of the ways that I like to describe identity synthesis is when I'm in pride, the number one thing about how I describe myself is that I'm gay. As identity synthesis comes into play, I happen to be a therapist, a yoga teacher, a husband, a really good cook, a gardener, and gay, and I read and I hike, and it's moved down the list. It's not the first thing I have to shove in your face when you meet me. It's part of a whole version of myself. So that's where we're looking at this synthesis of moving in. Now, any of you who have worked with scales before know that we write them in these wonderful linear fashions. But I'm going to tell you it's not linear, okay? You're going to bounce back and forth all over this place with clients who are going through this. And you need to just be able to be present with them. One of the things I think is very important, kind of going back to that scale, is kids are trying things on at this time. And a great example, I had a kid that I worked with, and when I first met him, he came in working on some depression stuff. Then he felt comfortable and he came out as bisexual. I was like, cool, so tell me what that means to you. And we worked with that for a while. And then he came in after a while and said, no, I'm gay. I was like, okay, cool, what does that mean to you? And he had found this guy at school that he had a big crush on, and it was really sweet. Senior year, he actually came in and identified as straight because he had found this girl that he really was attracted to. And so he was straight for his senior year. Now, as a therapist, if I lock into, well, last week you said you were bisexual, what's going on here? That's not going to work with what the client's doing. So understanding this fluidity of language is really important. And what we need to do is reflect back to our clients the language that they're using to describe themselves. Now, this also applies into working with transgender clients. One of the best things you can do when you're starting with a transgender client is ask them, first of all, what name would you like me to use, and what are your preferred personal pronouns? Now, for those of us who we're used to working with that community, it's going to feel awkward at first. It is. A lot of people go through this awkward phase. When you get used to it, it just becomes a natural part of the experience. And maybe one of the kids that I work with, we were in she, her description for quite a while. And then it suddenly started going to a they, them. And I started hearing that. So we checked in on, so tell me what's happening. We're going from she, her to they, them. What's going on right now? And by being aware of the verbiage of how your clients are describing themselves, it'll allow you to be with them right where they're at. Okay, does that make sense? Now, I know we moved through this pretty quickly. Any questions about this model coming up? Are you just overwhelmed right now?
Oh, it's good.
Are you wondering why you didn't get that second cupcake? Okay, is everybody feeling on track with this? Okay. Oh, by the way, the word identity pride, remember that for your CEU quiz. Okay. So let's talk a little bit now, what are families going through, what's happening? Because one of the things I think is so important to understand is initially it may be just your client who's going through this. And a lot of times your client will be experiencing it in your office, but their family won't actually know the full scope of what's happening here. And then your kid may be ready to start telling them. One thing that I always encourage my kids is to understand that your family is going to go through a grieving process. And then I also help families understand maybe right now you're going through a grieving process. Most people when they have kids, they're in the hospital, they're born, the baby's handed to them, they look down, they're rocking the kid, and they start seeing this image of their kid going to high school, going to college, getting married, buying a little house just down the block, with kids and grandkids running around, and this whole story is built in those very first few moments of holding a baby. Okay? And then your kid comes out. And all of a sudden that dream that you've been living with just gets shattered. And I want both kids and parents to know about this in that moment, because kids can be very much like, I'm gay, what are you going to do with it? And I want to allow them to give their parents space and time to process it. Okay? And at the same time, I want parents to understand I'm having all these conflicting feelings. I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm feeling betrayed, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of this. I let them know you're going through a grieving process. And all of a sudden you can watch them exhale as they understand that concept for themselves. So what can help in a family to really make a space where an LGBT kid can feel safe to have conversations? First of all, I think it's important for parents to provide an environment that is supportive of that story. There's a really interesting study that they did where they looked at gay males and their relationships with their fathers. And a lot of gay kids, actually gay adults, identified that they, when they were younger, that they felt some kind of distancing from their father because of a perceived difference about them as a kid. When they did the parallel interviews with the fathers wouldn't identify that they thought their kids were gay, but they did say quite often, well, there was something definitely different about him. And this tiny little gap, based on perception, turned into a huge relational issue later on. So this is just an example of how sensitive kids are about picking up information. Once again, as we talked earlier, what television shows you watch, how do you react when an LGBT character comes on? Let's say you're shopping in the mall and you see a trans person that you identify as trans coming towards you. What do you as a parent or a family react to that? Do you herd your kids away? Do you subtly just walk by and smile at them? The kids pick up on all of this energy and information. This will have a huge effect on what happens later on if your kid happens to come out to you. Kids pick up on these very subtle cues, and they will decide if it's safe or not in the family environment. So this is a very important piece of the puzzle. Another dynamic that affects us pretty dramatically is cultural stories. Okay? You had mentioned some cultural stuff earlier. If we look at this picture, in some cultures, it's like, it is what it is. But there's also another interesting story, and it's been kind of defined in the Hispanic community and the African American community. And it's the idea like, okay, you've come out to me, come here baby, let me hug you, let me hold you, we'll take care of you, but do not tell anybody else. We're gonna keep it in the family, okay? So there's this mixed message that's given that says, oh, we still love you, almost saying because nobody else will. That's kind of an underlying story in there, okay? So in some community and cultures, this will happen. Another thing to understand is for the kid and the family, we're also often looking at maybe being separated from a religious or spiritual community as well. So if you think about this idea, I'm not only going to come out, but I've been hearing a message that being gay is not okay in my religion. My religion is very important to me. I know it's very important to my parents. What's going to happen? Does this make sense to you guys? And once again, this can be a subtle message too. A kid that I was working with, he was really, had a great sense of his own identity and who he was, and was very, centered in that. But he and his dad just couldn't seem to find their way into clean communication. One of the things that we all worked on together in a family unit is trying to figure out, well, what was happening that was different there? Because mom was clean, the rest of the family was clean, there was something with dad. So dad attended a church. It was his church, not the family's church. Dad, really open, wonderful guy, always had respectful language in the room, never said anything that was, detrimental to this kid's self-esteem. But the kid knew that that church had put a message out into the community that gay was not okay. So even by the fact that his very open and very progressive dad attended that church, made him feel that his dad was not a partner in his coming out. Okay? So we need to look at all those aspects of it. And it was really surprising because we've uncovered this. The dad was in absolute shock because he was so loving and caring for his son as he had been coming out, and he didn't realize that this one subtle message that had been put out by his spiritual community was so affecting their relationship. So these are all things that the family needs to explore and look at in this coming out process. Okay. I've talked a lot. What do you guys have to say? What are your thoughts, questions, curiosities, experiences you've witnessed or seen? Where are you at with this whole story? Yeah.
With my kiddo, what he did was, little by little, the process, letting me know that, gay and then transgender. They had me watch, they had me go on Tumblr a lot, that social media, and just kind of get an understanding, because Tumblr's, majority of it's pretty open. They explain everything that you're explaining. He was giving me my education on
Right.
this. So it was really interesting just how the kids are going to try, like you said, testing you out, filling it out, and that was one way it went about.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, they want to see if it gross you out.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, it's a test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important to stress, especially for clinicians, that coming out is a constant, it's not a process that takes place from A to B, or A to D, or A to K. It's literally an ongoing and cyclical process. In fact, you can have to re-come out to the same people should they venture into the denial zone or pressure. Well, I'll just tell you this little story. So I came out when I was 10 years old to my parents, only because I was really sheltered and didn't know better. So that was a big boo-boo. And so then, that didn't go over well. And so then they kind of pressured me back into the closet, so to speak, where I was like, oh, no, don't worry about that. That was, literally I think I may have said, that was just a phase or whatever. So then, as you stated before with your best friend here, that when you give somebody this truth, it's no longer really yours, and it kind of has this whole organic experience of its own. And so I did that 5 years later, when I was in junior high, about to go into high school. And so, and I moved to another country. And so all of a sudden one day in the mail comes this book about homosexuality from this friend that I had handed my truth to. And so here comes this book in the mail, and when you're 15 and you get a package in the mail, your mom wants to know what it is. So I'm like, oh, it's a book. She's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, oh, no, whatever. So long story long, I had to then go through this again with my parents. Well, why would she send you that book? I don't know, which is totally ridiculous. As an adult, I know that's ridiculous. But I then had to do it again 2 years later because my parents were so resistant to that truth. And so you also have to do it in jobs, you have to do it in social settings, you have to do it, you know, I have a large cadre of straight friends, and so like I'll just go out with them or whatever, or go to games with them or whatever, and then there'll be like a single woman in the group who maybe hasn't been told, and like, you know, that's an awkward moment, you know, I know. So I don't want to go on and on, but it really is a constant battle, and it's not so much about your hesitance to be who you are and stand in your truth, but really the resistance of society and the resistance of certain groups or family or whoever to accept your truth and to realize that it's not about them, it's not their fault, it's no one's fault, it's not a bad thing, and it's a struggle. That's a struggle that I think as clinicians everyone should be aware of.
Well, and you bring up a couple of really good points. A lot of parents will say, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, that
This
was
is a
what I got.
conversation that comes in, it is. And you need to be prepared to say, I don't know, what do you think is wrong with this moment? Or a really good friend of mine, she recently helped me with this new version of that. It's like, well, tell me what's actually perfect about this moment. And it's a really powerful way to shift that deficit-based story into a more strength-based story. That was for you guys. They're my postmodern people in the background, so, okay, so that's the way to look at it, yeah.
I used to work at the Trevor Project, and that's much more of like a crisis counseling model. It's not
Right.
therapy by any means, but if we've got a call, we might actually, if we did kind of like a harm assessment or like a risk assessment, kind of steer the kid away from coming out at this particular time, because
Right.
there was no safety plan, they were pretty sure they were gonna get kicked out, stuff like that. So from a crisis model, I understand why that is feasible. From a therapy model, like what are your thoughts on that? Like, we never want to make decisions, but if we can predict somewhat that it might be a harmful decision for a 15-year-old, we all know about LGBT homelessness, prostitution, etc. So, what are your
Those
thoughts?
who don't, there's a lot of kids who get kicked out of houses, and the way they survive is by living on the streets. That also opens up a lot of potential to substance use, which for those of you who work in a substance community, you see constantly coming in as an underlying theme that a lot of people aren't speaking about in treatment. Okay? So, what I really encourage with my kids who are at a point where they want to start telling their story is, let's look at, if you drop the story into the middle of the pool, what are the rings that are going to happen? How is it going to ripple out into your world? And talking about those levels of safety and support that they're going to have. If you drop the pond in and they say, like, you know, my parents will probably kick me out, do you have someplace you'd be able to go? Yes, my best friend's family would take me in, or I know my aunt would be willing to take me. Okay, then you need to look at that. So exploring with them what will happen when they drop that pebble into the middle of the pond, and to see what the repercussions are. And because I have the training, the experience, I may point out, well, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? As a way to open their awareness to what this exciting moment for them is going to do into their world. Because you're right, I can't tell them to or not to. It's not my place. But I do encourage them to look at what that will mean. You have to understand, too, that in places like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Miami, coming out is a whole different experience than if you're coming out in Iowa or Wisconsin, okay? And so here in Los Angeles, you're going to see resources all over the place, okay? There are places where if a kid's coming out of their house, I can get them into places like that. We can get their needs taken care of, okay? I did an appearance on the Ricky Lake show, the new one, not the old one, the good one. And in that, I had this woman email me from South Carolina, and her son was coming out. She was in a small town. She had no resources, okay? And what I did was really helped her to find resources. But to hear the pain in her voice, knowing that her son was going through this difficult process and there was nobody there to help them, that's kind of why I get out here and do this work, okay? So it is about making people aware of what it will mean when they put that story into the world. Okay? You got a question?
Actually, If you wanna go
Oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I come from Iran originally, so the culture that I guess when you compare it to, you know, the Western, you have the Middle East culture and you have more conservative and you know all that. But I grew up around you know homosexuality because although someone as funny as our ex-president, the idiot that came up here. You know, makes it, you know, we don't have any gays in Iran. You know, actually, we do. We have everything else. It's just like part of the world. You know, we have everything. So, but besides that, I wanted to ask as a clinician, because if we work in a diverse community, you pointed out that the same difficulty that you would have as a gay individual to come out in your family, as someone coming from that culture, you would have if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be a musician, if you want to marry outside of, you know, norm, whatever that is, you know, the class. If you're rich and you want to marry someone that's poor, or vice versa. So a lot of those things happen, and people actually get, you know, thrown out of the house, you know, because they chose this college over that, this major over this, or decided not to even pursue that education and do something else. And it, not to dismiss that, you know, because what you guys go through, as you know, when you come out is a really, really hard process. But when you were talking about the back and forth, you know, I have seen the whole thing. It's just like when they come out and say, I want to do music. No, you don't want to do music. You want to be surgeon, you know, and they just shove it down your throat. Or you don't want to marry that person. You want to do this. So it's also really important to know that it's the differentiation aspect of it, that you, as an individual, that you need to help them out. That they can separate themselves from the family and create their own identity and be able to exit with an exit strategy that you said.
Well, the other thing that I'm very clear about too is over the years I've developed some cultural competency, but I will always ask my client, can you educate me? What would it mean coming out in your community or your religious belief system? Because I don't want to assume, I don't. And if they start looking at it and identifying, wow, there are all these factors, you know, there's an expectation as the oldest son, I'm supposed to lead on the family story, and if that drops by the side, I'm going to be a disappointment in my parents' eyes forever, you know, or I don't want anybody to know my community, so I can't tell anybody. So I can come out if I'm in West Hollywood, but I could never come back home and be gay in my community, okay? So it's important to understand, and I always have my clients educate me, because most of the stuff we read when we're educated is generalizations, and I want to know what your version of your culture is.
I love how you're describing this and sharing your story, and obviously sharing with the family, but I work in career counseling, so the question I work with is how to share this in my working community. And if this is a continuing process, sometimes clients might have to cover or pass. I've heard those terms thrown out. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that experience and process and words of wisdom.
Well, the one thing I say is it all depends on where they live. It does.
Yes.
Because laws state to state are extremely all over the place right now. In California, you're generally pretty safe from discrimination for gay, lesbian, transgender issues. There's still a lot of leeway in that. You travel, let's see, I think Nevada's not done anything yet. You just travel over the border and all of a sudden you're a whole different story, okay? So I would always want my client to be aware of what are your legal protections if you decide to do this. Once again, what is the need to do it? For some people, you know, like I'm just who I am, okay? I've done a lot of work on myself to be 100% comfortable with this person who's standing in front of you. So I'm going to walk in and I'm going to be okay with it. I come here and you immediately know I'm a gay man because I tell you I'm a gay man, and that's why I'm presenting today. There are other people who that is not going to be comfortable for them. So exploring what the need is to come out, and also understanding what the expectation is by coming out at work. Because those are the pieces I think you would want to address in that particular situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. So I get a feeling we're just about at that time for my presentation, and also for your guys, like respecting your needs as well too. So the one thing that I do want to leave you with, you talked Trevor Project earlier. How many of you have seen the It Gets Better campaign? Okay. So it's this campaign. Oh, you guys, I didn't see all of you. I would have turned more this direction. I apologize. The It Gets Better campaign is a series of videos that were done at first by a lot of celebrities and then by different organizations, all letting people know that it may be tough right now what you're going through as a teenager, but that it will get better and you just have to stay the ground. And I think it's a beautiful campaign. If you haven't seen any of the videos, I suggest watching them. The only issue I have with the It Gets Better campaign is it's passive. It gets better. Just wait, it'll get better. And I believe that we, those of you who decided to be here today and listened and conversed and thought about what we talked about, we are now going to be able to make it better. And I encourage you to take that challenge on from me to each of you, to go out into your world, to share the knowledge, and to help make it better and safer for these kids to have this journey. Okay? Thank you guys so much for giving me your time today.